Chapter 9, Đà Lạt, 1970 to 1972. The new business, the pharmacy, in 1970. The house on Yersin Street had always been alive with sound. For years, it echoed with the laughter of 12 children, the footsteps of siblings racing around the house, and the sudden eruptions of chatter that made the walls hum with energy. But by 1970, the rhythm of the household had changed. One by one, my older siblings had left, and Liem departed for France, his heart heavy, but his determination firm, and Tong set out for the United States, following a path of both uncertainty and hope. And then, in 1970, chị Thanh Vân, full of fire and vision, left for Sài Gòn to begin her career as a journalist. Suddenly, the house felt enormous in its quietness. The voices that once overlapped now seemed like echoes of memory. Only two older sisters, chị Thanh Hoa and Thanh Loan, remained at home, their presence a gentle comfort in the stillness. For me, a teenager attended Bùi Thị Xuân High School, the silence were both soothing and unnerving, a sign of change, of endings and beginnings. My father's two words. Father's life at this time unfolded in two words. By profession, he was the head of the veterinary department of Đà Lạt, responsible for the health of livestock across the province. It was a position of immense responsibility. The highlands rely heavily on cattle, pigs, and poultry. A disease outbreak could cripple not only individual families but also entire markets. Father oversaw vaccination campaigns, issued directives, and guided farmers with the authority of science and experience. But at the same time, he built something closer to home, a small pharmacy business run right out of our house on Yersin. In one corner of the Yersin home, he set up shelves and stored sacks of goods, bags of corn feed for the chickens, small bottles of medicine, powder, supplements, and vaccines, all carefully stored in the refrigerators. Farmers and townsfolk came to our door to get what they needed for their livestock, and our family became part of the teamwork. I can still see the picture clearly. Sacks of golden corn piled against the wall, scales on the wooden counter, glass jars and powders and liquids, and the faint smell of grain mixed with disinfectant. Chickens would cluck restlessly outside, tied in baskets brought by customers. Farmers' voices filled our courtyard as they discussed the health of their animals and sometimes their own worries about the war and future. This home business was not only Father's project, it was ours. Each joy has a task. Some weigh corn on the iron scale, carefully to balance the small weights. Others scoop feed into paper bags, folded and tied them with a string. I often stood by my father, listening as he explained doses or wrote down instructions for farmers who came from nearby villages. In truth, It was more than a business. It was an education in responsibility, discipline, and the value of work. Father never believed in letting us to sit idle. Work keeps the mind strong, he often said, and service to others gives meaning to our lives. Through this little pharmacy, we children learn that even in times of uncertainty, a family could create something steady and useful, a small light in the fog of war. Mother and the market. While father managed two worlds, mother kept our home steady with her daily rituals. Each morning, before the mist lifted from a pine hills, she and I walked together to the Dalat market. The market was a world of its own, stalls bursting with fresh produce, the earthly smell of potatoes and carrots, the sweetness of strawberries when in season, and the salty tang of fish lay out on trays. Vendors call out cheerfully, bargaining fill the air, and the hum of voices create a kind of music. Mother moved with quiet authority, her eyes sharp on the freshness, her hands quick to weigh and select. She knew every vendor, and they knew her, not only as loyal customer, but as a woman of dignity. Bà Thú Y. Watch her bargain was like watching a dance, firm, respectful, always balanced. Back at home, the rhythm of cooking filled our mornings. Pots simmer, knives chop, and the house filled with aromas of garlic, ginger, and herbs. For me, helping her was both a duty and a privilege. Between schoolwork and pharmacy tasks, I slipped into the kitchen to learn by watching her hands. Teenage life in Đà Lạt at Bùi Thị Xuân High School, my days unfolded between textbooks, chalkboards, and the whispering pine trees surrounding the campus. Đà Lạt itself, despite the war, still felt like a dream. Mist curled around rooftop in the mornings. Xuân Hương Lake shimmered at the town center, and flowers bloomed defiantly against the gray uncertainty of the times. I walked to school past Hồ Xuân Hương Lake, up on the hill of Võ Tánh Boulevard, and the cherry blossoms were bursting in early spring. At school, my friends and I whisper about teachers, about exams, about small crushes. Yet underneath it all lay the constant shadow of war. Many of our classmates had brothers or cousins in the army. Some had already died in faraway battles, Quảng Trị, Kon Tum, or An Lộc. Even as we memorized poems and solved equations, we knew our futures were tied to a country unraveling at the edges. At night, I bent over my homework by the lamplight, but the distant rumble of military trucks reminded me that beyond my desk, history was moving fast. The war years, 1971 and 72, the Vietnam War pressed harder into our lives during those years. In 1971, the South Vietnamese Army, with American support, launched a Lam Sơn 719 operation into Laos. The campaign ended in heavy losses. Whisper about in homes through newspapers softened the truth. Then, in 1972, the North Vietnamese launched the Easter Offensive. A massive assault across Quảng Trị, the Central Highlands, and toward An Lộc. Refugees streamed into the lot, carrying stories of horror, their faces etched with fear. Soldiers filled the streets in greater numbers, and the once carefree cafes carried the heavier silence. Though the lad was spared the worst of the fighting, the tension was thick. Father's veterinary department faced new challenges, more livestock arriving with displaced families, greater risk of disease outbreaks, and urgent demands for vaccines with limited supply. He left early, returned late, and often looked older than his years. At the same time, the home pharmacy became busier. Farmers came more frequently, anxious to keep their chickens and pigs alive amid rising uncertainty. We children worked harder, scooping feed, weighing corn, and handing over bottles of medicine. Sometimes we served 5 or 6 families in an afternoon. The courtyard became a place of stories, of lost villages, of sons in the army, or hopes that seemed to shrink with each passing month. Through it all, I saw my father's quiet determination, whether in his official office or in our modest home. He fought his own kind of war, one that did not make headlines, but one that kept life possible. The quiet house, the quiet of our house weighed on me most at night. I miss the noisy presence of siblings. I wonder about Liem in France, if he ate rice or only bread, if he felt lonely. I thought of Tong in America, carving a new life in a strange land, and I thought of chị Thanh Vân in Sài Gòn, her pen writing words braver than most voices dare to speak. Their absence was bright and lost woven together. The empty chairs at dinner table were reminders of change, of relentless movement, of the lot, of the time, the romance of the lot. And yet the lot still shimmer with romance. On weekends I bicycle with friends around Xuân Hương Lake. Couples stroll hand in hand, shoulders clasp their girlfriends' fingers tightly, as if afraid to let go. Flower gardens bloom as though war were only a rumor. The city wore its mist like a veil, softening its sorrows. For me, a teenager straddling childhood and adulthood, Dalat was both a sanctuary and a dream. It was the place where I discovered beauty amid fear, hope amid uncertainty. Reflections. Looking back, 1971 and 72 were years of thresholds for Vietnam. They marked a deepening war as American soldiers withdrew and South Vietnamese forces bore more of the weight. For our family, there were years of scattering, siblings leaving the house quieter, responsibilities heavier. For father, there were years of unrelenting duty. By day he was the province chief veterinarian, safeguarding herds and food security. By evening he stood behind the wooden counter of our home pharmacy, checking on the supplies of corn, feed, and medicines, the supplement income that was supported by his children. For mother, they were years of resilience, carrying baskets through the market, keeping our home warm and alive. For me, There were years of awakening to school, to responsibility, to the fragile beauty of Dalat in wartime. And for our house on Yersin Street, there were years of transformation from a loud hive of children to a quieter home, where the rhythms of work, study, and prayer carry us forward one day at a time. Through all the change, the lot remained in my young eyes a romantic city, a place where mist, pine trees, and dreams coexisted in the shadows of war. This is the end of chapter 9, to be continued.